Welcome everybody back to another live Maui Athletics Q&A. We've got a lot of great questions for you here today. Let's get it started so we can get through as many of these as possible. Again, we have so many submissions that we're probably not going to get to them all today, but we'll be able to get to a lot of these. So, starting off, our protein requirements based on current body weight or goal body weight. You can technically base these off of either. And if anybody's got any real questions about what range they should be in, you can, make a comment down below and I can get you some information. I actually have an entire blog article written about this. But the standard recommendations of, a pound per goal body weight can certainly work if you're non-obese. A gram of protein per daily per centimeter of body height can certainly work. But whether or not you use it off of current weight or goal weight, there are different ways to be able to get those and just make sure that you're using the right one that's appropriate for the style that you're using. And so whether or not you've got one that is based off of goal weight or whether that's one based off of body weight, if you have any confusion about that, feel free to post those up either in Mighty Networks, YouTube, send me a message on Instagram, and I'm happy to break that down for you. All right. Does birth control cause weight gain? Certainly, in some cases it can, but typically when it does, it's going to be shifts in water weight from hormone fluctuations. For most people, you don't really expect a massive amount of weight gain. What's really interesting with this, with the literature on this, is actually, if anything, when you look at the effects at a fitness program from contraceptive pills, it seems to potentially even increase strength and lean muscle gain. Beth, anything else to say to that?
Yeah, I hear this a lot in the women's circle. There's nothing inherent about estrogen and progesterone, which is what birth control is usually a combination of those two hormones. It's just like blaming estrogen and menopause for fat gain. So
Hmm.
the hormone itself is not the driver for an increase in weight. They can affect your hunger signaling, which would then make you eat more, which could then make you gain weight. But just taking that pill every single day and not doing anything differently is not going to automatically mean that you're going to get fat.
Balloon up. Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. Like I said, there might be I can conceivably see some shifts in water weight, but that should work itself out, assuming you're staying hydrated, assuming you're, continuing to train and sleep like you regularly do. Now, here's the one thing that I do want to point out. A lot of times when people start taking a new medication, maybe you're shifting health around in your life. You're like, you know what, I've not really focused on my health. It's time for me to start taking care of myself. Maybe you go to your doctor, maybe you get put on this medication, maybe you start working out at the same time. One of the things that you can expect when you first start working out and first start changing your diet is water flux. And so you might experience this when you change a medication. That doesn't necessarily mean the medication is the cause of it. So being conscious of all the different things that are going on in your life can actually shed some light on this. And maybe that's what's going on when people get this fear of, oh, when I started, doing things to really take care of myself, I saw a negative outcome. And just assuming that any kind of scale weight gain is a negative outcome is probably wrong from the start. But most likely, especially if you've got these like jumps, it's probably a water weight fluctuation. And there's probably a reason for that. And it could be hormones. It could be inflammation that you're not used to from the exercise process. It could be lack of sleep, or maybe you're shifting up your sleep patterns. Maybe you're getting in more fiber than what you're normally getting and you're retaining some water. All these things add in. If you continue forward, it will work itself out and you can relax and actually follow the process. Can you elaborate on mechanistic versus outcome data? When is each valuable? So you've probably heard me talk about this before when we're breaking down studies. And the reason that I talk about mechanisms versus outcome data is because in fitness and health, we see a lot of different claims, particularly on podcasts that are based on mechanistic data or rodent data. And what is really popular on these podcasts is to say, hey, if you put a cell under these conditions, this happens, and therefore you should do this because it's going to mean a health outcome of some kind or a benefit of some kind. I mean, examples of this would be you need to fast to increase autophagy, or you need to ice plunge to You can literally claim that either of those things does everything under the sun because people do, but they're using mechanistic data. They're not using outcome data. Now, the difference with outcome data is typically worth a lot more because outcome data shows what happens when you actually do it in a living human. And so we've got these mechanistic theories, which is what these are, of okay, well, if you do this, you're going to get X outcome, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's been shown in people. And so this when you have outcome data, that trumps any sort of mechanistic data because it shows what actually happens. And the reason that mechanistic data doesn't always work out to an actual health outcome is maybe the magnitude of the effect is not large enough to cause a health outcome. Maybe there's a compensatory mechanism in the body that prevents it from actually being a beneficial thing. And so, like an example is when we talk about that fasting, and you say, well, if you fast, you're going to greatly increase growth hormone release. It's true, you do. The missed outcome that they're suggesting with that is that that is either going to burn more body fat or that's going to cause you to gain more lean muscle. Now, this doesn't happen because when you're fasting, yes, growth hormone goes up. And as we've talked about before, growth hormone going up is usually to prevent you from losing muscle mass, not to build it. And so they're not mentioning that the other part of that equation that happens is IGF-1, one of the bigger things for growth, goes down. And so HGH goes up, but IGF-1 goes down when you fast, and therefore you don't end up building muscle. In fact, you might even lose muscle, but you're losing it at a slower rate because of the HGH. And so you could theoretically tell people, and they did for years and years and years, and are probably still doing it with fasting, hey, you need to fast because it's going to raise your HGH. And they're either inferring or blatantly stating that that is good for muscle growth, but they are not understanding the actual outcome. And so the outcome data shows that it doesn't do that. It actually may even cause muscle loss. And that's because of all these other mechanisms that are happening in the body that the mechanistic data isn't taking into account. So when we talk about mechanistic data, it is a good thing to look at when you don't have any other information on the subject and you're trying to formulate a hypothesis. It doesn't prove anything. It helps you formulate an idea so you can test that later to see if it actually does that. So the outcome data always trumps this. Um, this is a good segue. What is autophagy and what causes? I actually think that we answered that one
We
last
did that
week.
one last time,
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to make sure that we have not done these slides. Does it matter if creatine is micronized? Do we answer that one?
I can't remember. It sounds sort of familiar, but I can't remember 100%.
Okay. Let me answer that really quickly since that is an easy one to answer. Does it matter if the creatine is micronized? No. The benefits for creatine are going to be there if it's a creatine monohydrate versus a micronized creatine monohydrate are going to be there whether or not it's micronized. The benefit of micronized is it has a little bit better solubility and it might alleviate some GI distress. So if you get GI distress from creatine monohydrate, a micronized might help that. So is there anything wrong with micronized? No. Is there anything wrong with you if you currently have a creatine that you're using? It doesn't say micronized, but it's just a standard creatine monohydrate. If you're using it and you're fine and you're comfortable, there's no reason for you to switch. It's perfectly fine. Um, let's see. I actually think that we did these. All right, let me slide down to a different one. Suggestions for high intensity, low impact cardio for someone that doesn't enjoy cardio. The things that I can think of examples of this. When you say for someone that doesn't enjoy cardio, man, you're not going to like my examples. I mean, things
You're
like,
never gonna like cardio.
yeah, you're never going to like any of these examples. There's no way to like when you're really pushing yourself in cardio, make this something that's all of a sudden wonderful and fun. If you don't enjoy it. And now you might be able to learn to enjoy it over time, and that's a really good thing. So what I would start to look at are things like the ski erg, the rowing erg,
Rowing.
uh,
Swimming.
bikes of all kinds, swimming. I mean, there's a lot
Swimming
of different
sucks.
options. Yeah, I mean, swimming, it's one of the best things that you can possibly do as
It
far as
is. And
cardiovascular
talk
exercise
about
goes.
low impact. I mean, there's nothing that is better or easier on the joints than swimming.
Oh, swimming's great. I mean, the biking is great too.
Yep.
I actually would prefer what I recommend to people is typically the ski erg, something like a Concept 2 rower. But I was laughing about that because it was like something that, a cardio that someone could enjoy. And I'm like, they're not going to enjoy that at all. But,
They're
those,
delightful.
yeah, I mean, those types of things work really, really well for low impact. So if the question is, well, my joints hurt and what can I do? You've got a lot of options. It's just what are
Yeah.
you willing to do? And sometimes it's what do you hate to do the least? And if that's the answer, then that's the answer. And you just do it anyways because you're an adult and you know that it's a beneficial thing for you. Could you explain the reverse diet? The more I looked up and found some very wrong, the more I looked it up and found some very wrong and outdated info. Okay, so reverse dieting is an outdated practice. It is not something that really makes any sense. So, like, if you are being told by people you need to reverse diet up, they're working off of 10, 15-year-old programming type things. I mean, there are some studies now looking at this, and the idea with the reverse diet was how do I get back to maintenance to help counterbalance some of the negative hormone changes, to counterbalance hunger signaling, to counterbalance those minor drops in resting metabolic rate that I experience on a long-term cut or a severe, very restricted cut. So if you are trying to lose body fat, just raising your calories up a little bit, but still trying to stay under a maintenance of level of calories, that's not a reverse diet. That is literally just adding in calories to bring you to an appropriate calorie level. Because what you're saying when you are doing that is maybe I'm too low and I'm so low in calories, I can't follow my diet. And so, what is happening in a practical sense is that you are eating way above the calories that you have set. And this is what we typically see when somebody says, "Oh, I'm at 800 calories or I'm at 1200 calories and I'm not losing any weight." I'm in a calorie deficit. Well, you're not if you're not losing weight. You are 100% losing weight if you're in a calorie deficit. As we've talked about before, there is no such thing as metabolic damage. Your metabolism can't be damaged to the point where you can't lose body fat or can't lose weight. So, what people erroneously think of reverse dieting is, well, if I add some calories back in, all of a sudden I'll start losing weight. The reason that that works is because if you add some calories back in, your cravings and hunger might go down. You're more adherent and consistent with the diet. You start to move more in your daily activities, and you end up burning more calories overall. So it's not magic. It actually is still that calories in, calories out. You're just able to stick to it more readily with the idea of reverse dieting to get you out of these metabolic adaptations like the negative hormone effects and those different types of things. The only way to get out of those effects is to be back at maintenance levels or higher. And for an extended period of time, it's 2 or 3 months before your body really starts to bounce back. And so, to do that, the best way to do it is to literally immediately, when you are ready to start recovering, just go to maintenance. It's called a recovery diet, and that's what people use these days. Now, a lot of the bodybuilding competitors are still stuck on this because the coaches that used to teach this make a lot of money because if you say that, oh, a reverse diet, it takes specific planning and it takes expertise, well, then you can sell that. If it's just, hey, go back to maintenance, then everyone's like, well, that's not complicated. That doesn't sound like it's that bad, and so then they lose out on sales. And so there's a lot of people that are really kind of invested in this as a training strategy because eventually you will get back to that maintenance level. But the problem is if you're spending more than like a week or two to bump yourself up to maintenance, you're literally just staying in a calorie deficit that entire time. So you're still experiencing all of those negative side effects and it's probably getting worse over that time period. So what are you actually doing? Whether or not you go back to maintenance immediately or whether you take 6 or 8 weeks to get back to maintenance, you're going to gain the same amount of water weight, the same amount of muscle glycogen weight, if you're hitting the appropriate calorie levels. So one of the things that people get concerned about is they'll say, well, I don't want to go back to maintenance immediately because I'm going to jump up in weight. Yes, you will jump up in weight. And we talked about this before, 5, maybe even 10 pounds for some people. And that's okay. That's normal. Whether or not you do it over the span of 1 week or whether or not you do it over the span of 8 weeks, you're gonna gain that. It's going to happen. So if you have that mental buy-in of, okay, well, this is normal, it's going to happen anyways, it doesn't cause you any problems. And so I think that both Beth and I have talked about this in the past. The really big thing about these situations is when you start to do this and decide, okay, well, I'm going to get out of this cut, I'm going to go to maintenance, I'm going to feel better, I'm going to work on strength, I'm going to get healthier. Do it if you've been in a cut for a long period of time with the same foods that you were using at the bottom of your cut, just at higher amounts. That is how you prevent overshoot. That's how you prevent binging type behaviors because there's no way that you're going to go back to maintenance levels and you're all of a sudden going to be eating so many apples, so many grams of oats, so much fish that you're going to become fat. It's not happening. You're going to be so full, it's going to prevent that from happening. In fact, you're probably going to have problems hitting those maintenance levels, if
Yeah.
anything. And so the biggest mistake that people make, and what's really funny whenever I talk to competitors about this, is they're like, "Oh, well, I gained so much body fat if I go back to maintenance." I'm like, "Well, what are you eating?" And they're like, "Well, I can finally eat pizza again." And I'm like, well, there you go. You have all of these negative outcomes in your hormones. And one of the big outcomes in your hormones from this situation of being in a calorie deficit and losing significant amounts of weight over long periods of time is your leptin and ghrelin balance. And when leptin and ghrelin is out of whack, you're going to be a lot hungrier. You're going to eat a lot more. You're going to mindlessly eat a lot more. And if you immediately throw pizza into play without allowing those levels to rebalance, you're gonna overeat. And so
Well,
it
and that's actually where this whole reverse dieting and metabolic damage thing came from. It actually came from the competitive bodybuilding circuit where people would, and you've seen these photos of people that have their like hoard of food. I mean, I did this after I competed. I had like a huge stash of everything that I couldn't eat during prep. I had like literally 10,000 calories worth of food sitting at home. And the first thing that I did when I got home was I ate all of it. So you've restricted for so long that once you step off stage, you quite literally binge eat to the point of exploding. And then you gain literally 20 pounds overnight. And so that's where this was born from. It was born from this desire to kind of rein in this period of binge eating that almost every single competitor goes through after they step off stage. It was a way to kind of counteract that. But what it turned into was, you can sort of slowly increase your calories over time and literally maintain your body weight. Like it does not, the science does not support that, but that's where it was born from. It came as a reaction to post-competition binge eating.
Yeah, and the really funny thing though is if you think about this from a logical perspective, if you're somebody that's prone to disordered eating, you probably shouldn't be
Shouldn't be
you shouldn't
competing.
be doing these things. Like if you
Shouldn't be
can't
competing.
if you can't go from your cut to maintenance without having an eating disorder, then it's
Agreed.
not appropriate for you to do this. So it's
Agreed.
always funny to me when people argue, well, it's the only way that I can fight off an eating disorder. And it's like, well, then you shouldn't be doing this to begin with. Like you shouldn't be cutting that low. You shouldn't be stepping foot on stage. This is one of those things that you have a psychological, I mean, it's a disease essentially. And
Yeah,
and
and
you
for a
need to
lot of
treat
people though,
that.
it's like it's born from like you don't know that it's going to happen to you until it happens when you're
Yeah.
competing. But like that's why I'm very anti bodybuilding competition because most people, I mean, if you saw this happen in the Minnesota starvation experiment, I mean, there's the parallels to the participants in the Minnesota starvation experiment pretty much mirror what happens to a competitor who is prepping for the stage in terms of how they think and react around food. And those eating disorders are actually usually built in the competition prep experience. So you might not have them going into competition prep and the getting ready for a show will actually cause them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting kind of like tangent to this kind of stuff because they've done a lot of research on things like counting macros, going on diets, and all those different types of things. And none of these things are associated with higher risks of eating disorders. However, bodybuilding competitions are. And the real question is it the bodybuilding experience itself, or is it people with eating disorders tend to do bodybuilding? And so it's
Mhm.
probably a combination of the two.
Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, and so if you're a normal person and you got a coach and they're like a nutrition coach that usually works with bodybuilders or they're a bodybuilder themselves, you have to be very conscious of these recommendations because maybe they have an eating disorder and this is how they are attempting to deal with their eating disorder. Because there
Mhm.
is no physiologic benefit. There is no physiologic benefit ever proven for reverse dieting. There are studies suggesting there are no physiologic benefits, but there's nothing that's been proven as a benefit for this. So I would be very cautious of someone saying, well, this is the only way to do it, or it's vastly superior, or anything like that. I mean, if they're telling you to take longer than a week or two to get up to maintenance, it's just flat out wrong. And so if they want to tell you, if you say, hey, look, going up stepwise in a week makes it a lot more comfortable for me, then that's perfectly fine. I don't really have a big issue with that. But these reverse diet protocols typically last 6 or 8 weeks,
Yeah.
if not longer, and that's 100% wrong.
You're
So
just sitting in a calorie deficit for like it's just
yeah, I mean
it
it's
amazes me. Like people literally want to like push their calories up by 50 calories at a time and it's like
yeah, it's really bad for you. Does apple cider vinegar have actual benefits, or is it just some influencer clickbait? Believe it or not, it has actual benefits. Probably not for you, because if you have normal blood sugar regulation, you do not need this. This might have a benefit for somebody who is like literally on the cusp of becoming diabetic or who is diabetic. The problem with recommending it for people that are diabetic, I mean, it's very like almost situationally specific because if you have diabetes, well, then you need to probably have it controlled by medication. And so you still would not be using this. So, like the people that it would actually benefit are people that are probably still not going to use it because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But does it actually affect blood sugar in a positive way? Yes. Is this a good thing for you to be doing if you have glucose control? No. You need to let your body do what it's supposed to do because there are beneficial aspects of spikes in blood glucose. It spikes for a purpose. And so whether that's shuttling nutrients or energy into the muscles, I mean, that could be one of them. I mean, you could cause some problems by trying to micromanage this type of thing. So I would stay away from this unless your doctor is telling you to use this for whatever reason. Is it realistic to add some muscle while keeping fat the same for an advanced lifter? Yes, it's realistic to do that. Is it predictable? No. And particularly for advanced lifters, if you're going to want to add functional muscle protein, if you're going to want to add bigger muscles over time, you're probably going to have to be in a calorie surplus. You're probably going to maintain rather well, um, at right below maintenance or something like that, but you're not going to build significantly outside of at least a minor calorie surplus. And so that's probably necessary. And when you're in any sort of calorie surplus, the expectation of gaining a little bit of body fat is probably appropriate. And so the only people that can really do this predictably as an advanced lifter are people that are on steroids. So is that you? Maybe, maybe not, but that's where it would start to make some sense. How often do you need to change your workout routine if you are still progressing? The answer is never. If you're still progressing, if you are still using progressive overload, if you're still able to increase the load on a set, if you're still able to increase, reps up to a point, you don't ever technically have to change your routine. Now, there are benefits to changing your routine. Some of them are psychological, some of them are emotional, like maybe you just have fun doing something different. Um, Maybe you are using different routines because over time, having a variety of different routines can allow you to hit the muscles in a little bit of a different way, which can cause an increase in progress. But the bigger issue is not extending a program out too far. That's something that literally almost nobody has an issue with. The issue is changing things up too quickly. And so I certainly would never go any sooner than 4 weeks. 6 weeks can be great. 8 weeks can be great. 12 weeks can be great. 16 weeks can be great. Those are usually the time frames that I would use for programming within those. And anywhere within any of those can work just fine depending on how you program. Thoughts on the following three supplements: peak ATP, beta alanine, and glutamine. Peak ATP, don't waste your money. Beta alanine, that can work. It works particularly well for exercises that last 1 to 10 minutes. So, is it the best supplement for maximal strength or physique style movements? Maybe, maybe not. You're probably not doing a set that takes longer than a minute. Is it great for other forms of weight training? I mean, it would be awesome for things like CrossFit. You've got a lot of movements and WODs and circuit training. It would certainly be really good for circuit training if you do circuit training. Those types of things last 1 to 10 minutes, quite a bit. And so if you've got anything like that, combat sports, strength, strongman, all those different types of things would benefit significantly from beta alanine. Beta alanine and betaine are probably two good things for CrossFitters, strongmen, combat sports. I mean, even sports like soccer and basketball. Soccer in particular for certain positions, like for like defense or strikers who spend a lot of time just kind of standing around while the other, side of the field is doing something, can probably get benefits from those bursts of 1 to 10 minutes. Midfielders is probably not going to help you quite as much since you're constantly running, but the other people could benefit from that. L-glutamine. There are no benefits for L-glutamine for fitness purposes themselves. It's not going to increase recovery. It's not going to increase performance. There's confusion about this because they can certainly show you that glutamine can do things like increase recovery. What they're not mentioning is that you already get enough glutamine in your diet. If you're eating anywhere near your protein amounts, you're getting enough glutamine. When can glutamine be helpful? Glutamine could potentially be helpful. We don't have full proof for this. It could potentially be helpful at the bottom of like a bodybuilding prep cut because maybe it can give some added benefits to like immune health. It could be beneficial in people with IBS. It could be beneficial for people that have burns, HIV therapy, stuff like that. So, is this going to be something that you should be taking as a regular supplement? Probably not. It's not really going to help fitness pursuits. Does rep range matter if you take each set to failure? Yes and no. It matters as far as if you are doing anything between about 4 and 30 reps for hypertrophy, for building lean muscle, you're going to build about the same if your volume load is equated by the end of the week. And so if you're, doing a 6 by 10 and you lift X amount of weight, it's going to be very similar to doing a 10 by 6 if you lift the same amount of weight by the end of the week. I mean, it's going to equal out. Does that mean that it's the same? Does it matter for everything? Yeah, it actually does because lower reps will likely increase strength more, maximal strength more than these higher reps. Even if hypertrophy is the same, strength is going to increase better with the lower reps. Now, at the ends of the spectrum, closer to 4, closer to 20 plus, you're going to have some diminishing returns, which is why there was that whole theory of, okay, well, between like, depending on who you talk to, but between like 6 and 12 or 8 and 12 or 8 and 15, all of these things are like the best for growing muscle. The reason that people say that, and now that we have more information and we know a little bit better, the reason that practically in the real world worked out for so long is because when you're lifting really, really heavy, it is something that can really fatigue you and drain you and potentially cause a little bit of, agging aches and pains and stuff like that in your joints. On the other end of the spectrum, when you're lifting really high volume, it is massively fatiguing. It is very hard to recover from. It really increases CNS fatigue. It really increases the burn. It really increases the pump, all those different types of things. So, like, you can't keep up with an overall program if you're just doing one or the other. It just becomes very problematic. So, either you stick in the middle or you try to get some of the advantages of that better strength increase by strategically using some of these heavier loads, lower volume lifts in combination with some moderate and lesser high volume work. And so if you look at our programming, we'll actually do that quite a bit. We'll start off a day with some heavier lifts, or maybe have the first or second lift be the heavier lifts. Maybe we'll pre-exhaust you in the beginning just for fun. But there's a reason that these heavier lifts in the program take priority or precedence in the days. They're either first or second in the lifts. And the reason that we do that is because you have the least amount of built up fatigue. You can use these to your advantage to build maximal strength, and then you can go to some of the lighter, albeit higher volume work after that, really hammer that muscle home and do it in a way that'll allow you to do it to be able to recover for the next time you train. And so if you're using all super low or all super high, you're probably going to chip into your ability to recover, and that's going to cause problems long term. And so you'll see some studies and they'll look at it and they'll be like, oh, well, it's the same thing. If you look at it for like 10 or 12 weeks, it's like, yeah, but now take that out over 6 months and see if people are still recovering after that. And so that's why you will typically shift up your rep ranges, or you will do kind of like a linear progression and progress the reps over each week and change things up. I don't love that idea because I think it gets kind of boring when you're doing like 3 sets of 10 for like 5 lifts, 5 exercises in a row. I think that's kind of dumb. But it can still work. It doesn't seem to work quite as well as undulating periodization, but it does work. If you're not sore after a lifting session, is that a sign that you need to do more volume or weight? No. Soreness is not an indicator of a good workout. And this is something that a lot of people get really confused on. And again, this is actually something that I have an article on. So if people are interested in seeing the actual research behind this, post up in YouTube and post up in Mighty Networks and stuff, and we'll get you that. But soreness Um, it's one of those things that people like to chase because it makes you feel like you're doing something. And there's a lot of people that build programs around this. I mean, this is one of the reasons that we have some of these super high volume or super high interval training programs because it makes you feel like you're really draining and it's working really well. And in fact, I've actually seen, Beth can probably comment on this a little bit better than I can, but I have a lot of clients that will come over from CrossFit and they'll say, okay, well, it's time for me to really start to, I like CrossFit, but I want to maximize my physique return. And then they're really surprised by how much they don't feel just beaten down. And I'm like, that's a feature, not a bug. Like, we're actually giving you the benefits of the physique without the hits to the fatigue and the recovery. And so, people that have trained in the past to really chase the soreness are usually problematic from both chasing soreness and super high volumes. And they think that that's the sign of a great workout. Have you noticed that, Beth?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, CrossFitters it's really hard to get them to back off of chasing volume and chasing soreness. They think that they need to be in the gym for 2 to 3 hours a day and that they just need to wreck their bodies in order for that to be productive.
Yeah, and so it's not a great sign of progress. And I mean, just to give you some, we talked about mechanistic stuff earlier, but just to give you mechanisms for this type of thing. When you are first starting out in training, you're going to get more sore than you're ever going to get after that. It's because you're deconditioned. You have never been conditioned to this style of working out. So when you're first training or you're first trying a new training program, you're going to get more sore than ever before. And people will oftentimes love this feeling. The more conditioned you become, the more advanced that you become, the less sore that you will get. The more hydrated you are, the less sore that you will get. The less eccentric work that you do, the less sore that you will get. But even though you're less sore for an advanced trainee, they tend, outside of that, really beginning phase, they tend to grow better than a lot of these people that are very sore in these beginning stages. And it's because soreness is not a sign of hypertrophy. But we just mentally start to put it there. And so oftentimes people end up chasing that. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of people stay lifetime intermediates because they can't get around that idea of this feels great, but it may not be the right move towards what I'm trying to achieve. Should there be leg drive with a dumbbell bench press, just like a barbell bench press? The answer is yes, as best as possible. You're always going to want leg drive. Stability from your legs is a very important part of benching. I like to say that bench press is notoriously the most deceptively difficult lift. And I say that because it is a super, super easy lift to just start doing. Literally, everybody that first starts in the gym pretty much can just hop onto a bench and do a bench press. If you can lift the 45-pound bar, you can hop on, you can feel like you did an exercise, you can feel like you worked out. It doesn't work that way with like deadlifts or squats or something like that. Remember the first time that you ever did deadlifts and squats, you're like, okay, well, I need to kind of feel this out. And spend some time learning about the movement here. With barbell bench press, people kind of feel like they figure it out very, very quickly. The problem is mastering it is very difficult. And leg drive is one of those big things. And for people that don't understand what leg drive is, you want to create tightness from both ends of your body. You are tilting your shoulders down and back and essentially aiming your shoulder blades, you're retracting your body to aim your shoulder blades down to your back pockets in your pants, and you are tilting your hips to aim your butt posteriorly up towards your shoulders. And at the same time, you are drilling your feet into the ground and establishing tightness. This tightness is what allows you to have the most mechanical tension on your pecs, which makes you the strongest, which makes you the safest, which makes you grow the best. And so people will often ignore this bottom part. They'll always in their minds, you always hear, okay, well, retract my shoulders and go to the bench press. And then their legs are kind of flopping all over the place or just very, very loose. Somebody should be able to come up to you and slap you on the knee, and you should stay relatively stable. If you're not staying relatively stable, if your foot comes flying off the ground, you do not have stability in the legs. And so this is a very, very important thing if you want to ever bench press well or get the most out of your pressing, when you're going into the gym, getting the best return for your time. It is very important to make sure that you have the stability in your legs. Now you will see, and I actually know of a a big time menopause guru who just posted her workout for today, and her legs are flailing all over the place in her bench press. And a lot of times people will misunderstand what's going on and they will intentionally put their feet up on the bench. If you have a previous lower back injury and putting your feet up on the bench is the only way for you to bench comfortably, feel free to do it. You are lowering your progress comparative to a bench press where your feet are locked into place on the ground, but you're adjusting for something that you've got going on. Now, a lot of times you'll see these people that are kind of pseudo-science based lifters putting their feet up because they've seen a study that takes EMG data, which is essentially a little pad that they press onto the muscles, or another way to check electrical information in the muscle, and they will have somebody perform the bench press. And they will say, okay, well, what kind of electrical stimulation are we getting from this? Because this can give us an idea of how much the muscle is firing. That is true. When you put your feet up, the pecs, the chest, the shoulders will fire more with your feet up versus your feet on the ground. And so they've made this erroneous leap that if the EMG data is showing a higher activation of this muscle, then it means better growth. And that's not true. And it's not true because when your feet are planted and stable, you can increase mechanical tension in that muscle that you're trying to hit much more readily because you're stable. It should not surprise anybody if I could tell you that you can probably squat more on a with a barbell on the ground than you can with a barbell standing on a Bosu ball. That doesn't surprise anybody. It's the same thing with your feet up on the bench. You have lost all of that posterior, or not posterior, you've lost all of that stability in the lower part of your body. And so what's happening with the EMG is your muscles are trembling up top because it's trying to balance you in a way that you didn't need before. Now, that trembling instability will show up on an EMG as higher activation because the muscle's spazzing all over the place trying to keep you stable. That doesn't mean the muscle is being worked as thoroughly. It means it's chattering. And so, with it throwing up all of these high signals, these people who aren't really um, educated on the topic are using this as a way to try to claim, hey, by doing it this way, you're going to get some benefits out of it. But with the bench press, for some reason, it kind of sounds logical to people. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I feel it more, all those kind of things. But if I told you, hey, I want everybody to be squatting on a barbell back squat on a Bosu ball, you'd be like, he's fucking crazy. Why would I do that? It's the same thing. It just doesn't feel like we're saying the same thing between the two. One seems logically like that's crazy. The other one logically sounds like it's smart, but it's the same thing. And they're using the same basis between the two. And so, should you have leg drive when you do dumbbell bench press? The answer is yes, because it will create more stability, which will allow you to create more mechanical tension. Anything to do to avoid getting muscle cramps. So originally, when we used to see the data about muscle cramps, everybody used to say, well, it's an electrolyte imbalance and it has to do with hydration status.
Mm.
Newer information that we have about it says that those probably have something to do with it, albeit probably not that much. And they base this off of more and more data that we get back. If you've got somebody that has muscle cramps, if you give them a lot of water, if you give them a lot of sodium, potassium, all those different kinds of things, it doesn't seem to alleviate the cramps. And so they started to say, okay, well, if that's the problem, wouldn't giving these things to a person help fix it? And it doesn't seem to. So that can't be either the entire problem or the main problem. And so, with more and more studies done on it, what they found is that it's probably a neural excitation. It's probably the neurons firing, the nervous system firing a whole lot. And so, when people talk about avoiding muscle cramps, usually this happens a lot under two conditions. You're brand new to training and you're trying out new training for the first time, or you have started training and then you decided to up your volume very significantly in a very short period of time. So, what you're doing is you're essentially overloading your nervous system. And we will see this a lot with things like abs. I mean, you start to do abs for the first time and you haven't done abs in years and years and years, and you're just like kind of stuttering on the way up the entire time. You can avoid this type of stuff, including the run to muscle cramps by progressing up a little bit more slowly. It will alleviate, but you're going to have to adjust your volume. And if you're doing a certain volume and you're like, man, I'm cramping really badly, I'm constantly doing this every time I go in, it means you need to dial back the volume and make sure that you're warming up adequately, certainly. Make sure that you are hydrated, certainly. Make sure that you're not depleted on electrolytes, certainly, because they have something to do with it. They don't seem to be the main cause. Um, but this neural excitation is probably the biggest thing. And if you have these types of things, massage, self-massage is the number one way to get rid of this. I know that people are sitting there like pounding water, hoping that it goes away, but self-massage probably works a lot better. So, stay hydrated, drink your water, do your warm-ups adequately. And if you're continuously experiencing this, if this isn't just a one-off, that means, hey, make a note in your training log and say, hey, I went in and I did 4 sets of 20 reps of crunches. Maybe I should do 2 sets of 15 reps to start. And then the next week I'll do 3 sets of 15 or whatever it is, and then build up that way. It's going to be a different prescription per person because each person starts off at a different starting point. But having the volume is probably smart and then seeing how you do there. And it's okay. I mean, if it's going to take you 3, 4 weeks to build back up, 3 to 4 weeks building back up where you're not constantly getting cramped and trying to fight through potential injury causing situations is smarter than trying to just power through. And so this is one of those situations that a little bit of auto regulation works better than anything else. And I feel bad for everybody trying to pound water to alleviate the situation because it probably has nothing to do with it. Um, in how many exercises for a muscle group should I apply progressive overload? You should apply progressive overload to every set. Every working set should be progressive overload as best as you possibly can. And the answer isn't you need to go up in weight every set. It's that you should be attempting to go up in weight every set. It's the volitional effort that makes the benefit. It's not that you are technically going up every set, because as we've talked about before, the more advanced that you become, the less likely you're going to go up week to week to week. And eventually, when you're advanced, you're not going to go up for many, many months at a time. But the fact that you are trying to is what matters. And this is why we talk about intensities and working within 1 RIR or whatever the reps in reserve range is that we recommend for whatever week it is. But that is a very, very important thing because this is how you get those returns on the effort that you put into the gym. Because if you're too far away from that proximity to failure, your body's not forced to adapt. It's not being challenged enough. And so it says, okay, well, they're not close enough to failure. I am not being challenged enough. I don't need to change because I can handle this. And so it's kind of like a very rude example of like if you were just to lift like a pencil, you would never expect that to build a muscle because it's not hard enough. With weight training, if we're lifting, 4 or 5 reps short of failure and we're not a beginner, we might think we're doing something, but from our body's perspective, it's saying, yeah, this is okay. I'm fine with this. And so the feeling of discomfort versus actually being close to failure can be very different for different people. And that's why we recommend at least looking in that reps in reserve or intensity section in Mighty Networks, reading through and then identifying whether or not you should do an intensity check on yourself if you've not experienced one of those, that week 5 and 6 where we jump to like 1 to 0 RIR. If you're doing those 0 RIR weeks, you know where you figure out where failure is. But if you want to do it earlier, we actually give some ways to do an intensity check earlier in there. I've heard people say that they don't tolerate bread in the United States but are fine eating it in Europe. What is the deal? The deal is not that it is safer or healthier in Europe. It is not. It is just bread. The difference is in the United States, we use red wheat varieties. They are heartier and have higher protein contents. In Europe, they do not use the red wheat variety that we use. They have a lower protein content. The higher protein content, which is often from gluten, tends to be a little bit more problematic for certain people's GI tracts. And so if you've got somebody who is sensitive to gluten or whatever, protein might be contained in whatever grain product that you're using, and they go to Europe, and they have something with a much lower protein content, they might say, "Oh, this bread is healthier for you." When no, it's you just have a sensitivity to a food. And so a lot of people will mistake this for something that is inherently healthy or unhealthy, and it has nothing to do with that. It's literally the grain that they chose.
And side note, You can actually buy those flowers on Amazon and get them shipped to your house. Like you can buy European pasta and flour on Amazon and have it shipped to you.
Yeah.
But another thing that is important here is most European cities are walkable. So you're usually moving a hell of a lot more when you're on a European vacation, walking around, being a tourist, which can help with digestion. So there's nothing like they don't ban certain things in Europe and not here. Like that's not what this is. Their ingredients are slightly different, and you're probably moving around more and aiding in your digestion when you're in Europe.
Well, just as a fun aside, since we're kind of on that topic, I want to quickly address the Europe is healthier than the United States from a food supply perspective. The answer is no, that's not true. And the other thing that people say is, oh, well, in Europe there's a lot more things that are banned because of health. And no, that's not true either. Actually, the United States has stricter laws. And this is very surprising for most people, but the United States has stricter laws. Now, currently, when this is being recorded, as an example, there are 16 food dyes that are used in Europe that are illegal in the United States. There are four food dyes that are used in the United States that are illegal in Europe. We have a much stricter set of rules for things like food dyes. The same thing goes with sugars. High fructose corn syrup here versus there. It is not illegal in Europe to use high fructose corn syrup.
It's usually called something else different on their label, though. That's the other thing that a lot of people don't know is their labeling. They often have the same ingredients. They're just called something different in Europe, and people here don't know that. Like red dye 40 here, I forget what it's called.
It's like E129 or something like
Yeah.
that there.
But
It's
it's like
it's
it's the same
yeah.
ingredient, it's just called something different. So when people are scanning back of a box in Europe, they're like, "Oh, this doesn't have red 40." It does. It does.
Well, it may or may not. It's not illegal there. And so
No,
uh,
but
you know,
it's called something different, so you're not going to be able
yeah.
to identify it on
Yeah.
the box if you're looking at the ingredients. And are you going to talk about the risk-based versus hazard-based model differences?
And I can get to that in a second. The other thing I want to talk about was trans fat. I'm getting a lot of examples and I'm going to kind of bring it all together here. So another one is trans fat. Trans fats have been shown like unequivocally to be very dangerous for health. The United States has banned them completely. Europe has not. You can actually
Mhm.
get trans fats in Europe still. And so
I
it's
can
it's
get
not
good McDonald's fries over in Europe.
yeah, it's the old McDonald's fries that were like killing everybody. And so like in the United States, even the Europeans are like, yeah, this is dangerous, but they didn't outlaw it. So like it's
Yeah.
just funny to hear like, oh, everything's safer in Europe. It's like, no, it's not. It's
Yeah.
kind of worse. But like, so here's where it is safer. Well, not safer. Here's where it is different. So anytime you have these arguments where people are like, well, look at like Fruit Loops in Canada and then look at Fruit Loops in the United States, they use different ingredients, or they'll use any country in Europe and they'll say like, look at whatever it is there and then look at here and they've got better ingredients than here. It has nothing to do with health. Every choice that is made as far as this goes, because most of the world is pretty much on par. Like they all agree on what's healthy and what's not. Like 99% of the time. And so when you have a discrepancy in the products, that doesn't mean that this other country has found it unsafe. And in fact, like an example is that Fruit Loops one is a very real example. In Canada, there is a Fruit Loops version, and this became a meme, which is why this spread so much. There is a Fruit Loops version that has natural flavoring and natural dyes. They also sell the kind that we sell in the United States in Canada. It just wasn't that version that they like to use for this meme to show, hey, look, they've got a different thing. They have a different thing, and it's different depending on province. And so they have provinces where they sell the exact same one they sell in the United States. So it's not a Canadian thing. What you will find the difference is between the two is in Europe, they might use sugar beets to flavor something. In the United States, we might use high fructose corn syrup. Well, high fructose corn syrup and sugar beets, they're both very problematic in high doses, the sugars. If it causes a massive calorie surplus, if you're making too much of your diet out of these things, yes, it's going to push out, micronutrient rich sources. The reason that they use things like sugar beets in Europe is because there are European farmers that have a very large percentage of the economy in sugar beets. If they were to allow the major usage of high fructose corn syrup, their economies would destabilize. And so they give priority to sugar beets because they don't want their economies to tank. Similarly, the United States gives subsidies to high fructose corn syrup because we make a lot of corn. We make a lot more corn than we make beets. In Europe, they make a lot more beets than they make corn. It's different environments, it's different soil, it's different climates. So each country is using what they can make and then making choices based off of two things. And it's not health. They are making choices based off of what is the demand of the public in the area? What are they willing to buy? And what is economically feasible? Those are the only two choices that are they're causing these differences. It has nothing to do with health. So it's really funny when you get into these arguments with these people that are saying, "Oh, well, they're choosing this because it's healthier and, blah blah blah." That's not why they're doing it at all. And they've never said that that's why they're doing it. It is something that is spread on the internet, and it's typically spread on the internet by Americans. Which is the funniest thing. The Europeans, for the most part, aren't running around telling us this. They love to say that they've got better food, but they've got better food from a freshness perspective because they produce a lot less food. We are the largest mass producer of food in the Western world, and we do it through mass production. And so when we do it through mass production, there's going to be logistics. I mean, we're going to have to ship things from like the Midwest to the rest of the country. We have got a huge country. In Europe, I mean, their countries are the size of small states. And so to get something from their farmers to their markets takes a day. And so they don't have to pick it before peak ripeness. This is a hard thing to say for me. Before peak ripeness, they can pick it at ripeness and they can take it to market. So they get a fresher piece. In the United States, the food is just as good. You're just getting it earlier or later than peak ripeness a lot of the time because of the logistics involved. So it's going to taste worse. So there's a lot of factors that come into play here, and it's typically Americans that are causing this problem by presenting the situation as something that it's not. And literally nobody has stood up and said, "Hey, all of this is wrong." And so
Well,
it's
people have
it's
tried.
I know they get yelled at, and it's like, well, you don't care
Yeah.
about health. Like it becomes a really big ad hominem argument, and so it's really funny to see this stuff play out. And then on top of that, what you had talked about before was risk versus hazard based models, and so this has less to do with this type of stuff and more to do with things like pesticides and such. But when you're deciding um, between um, if something is dangerous or not. Europe and the United States use different models. And so there could be something in Europe that they say, hey, this might be dangerous. Even if it's not illegal, they might say, hey, this might be dangerous. And then somebody will point, oh, well, Europe says that this is dangerous. They use a hazard-based model. And in a hazard-based model, whether or not something is actually practically dangerous, it doesn't matter. It only matters as if it's been shown to be dangerous ever. And under these same models, they will get a lot of times certain things will get like dispensations to say, okay, well, we can remove this from this, even though under our laws it technically would fall under this. Organic fruit is one of those, coffee is one of those. Both of these two things are technically dangerous under these laws, but they get an exemption because it's fruit and it's coffee and wood furniture would technically fall under these things. There's a lot of different things that will, hey, you cannot drink coffee without like unlimitedly without it potentially causing harm to somebody. You can't eat organic fruit, believe it or not. The thing is, there is no way for a human to eat enough organic fruit really to cause a problem because it's self-limiting. I mean, the fruit's very filling, the fiber, the nutrients, all these different types of things. You just can't do it. You can drink enough water to kill yourself, technically. And so when the United States uses a model, we use something called a risk model. And so we take into account the dose, which is practically smarter. And so we'll look at something and we'll say, oh, well, this non-nutritive sweetener like sucralose, there's no risk because you would have to have 8,000 cans in one day to cause a risk, but the liquid amount would kill you before the sucralose caused the problem. And so you'll get different interpretations of some of these laws. And even though the product is perfectly legal in both because they realize that it is not a practical risk, there will still be a warning based off of one of the governing bodies in a European country because they're using a hazard-based model. And I can't tell you why people use hazard-based models. It's just something that they got into when they started doing these risk assessments or these assessments for food and stuff. And so that's why you see some of the discrepancies and some of the messaging that's involved, but you will typically see only rarely things that are banned in one or the other. And just, I mean, that whole thing about the the food dyes is one of the bigger ones. And then you realize, okay, well, the United States has probably stricter laws for these things. And it blows people's minds because we use the food dyes a lot more. But the entry for them is more strict. Like there's more safety testing. There's more strict regulations for what's used. We just tend to use a lot more, and we use a lot more because it's cheaper to produce. They last longer. They make the products cheaper. People don't prior to the last couple of years don't seem to care whether they're buying it or not. And so as a manufacturer, if you've got something that's safe, that is cheaper, that can allow you to put a product out cheaper, why wouldn't you use that? And so that's what's been going on. And so preference for people in, certain provinces in Canada was we don't want this. And so they weren't selling it. And so what is a company going to do when they're not selling a product? They're going to change the product. And so that's what ends up happening. Is HIIT or sprint interval training workouts necessary for perimenopause? You want to take that one, Beth?
No, nothing is necessary for menopause. Whatever way that you enjoy working out in any phase of life is the way that you need to work out. This is coming from a lot of these podcasts that have been dropping lately that there has to be, I forget what she terms it, polarized training, where you either need to be doing HIIT and absolutely killing yourself or like walking. That you can't be in any of those zones that are in between like zone 2 and zone 4. And that's really just not the case. And also, like this whole thing about high intensity interval training, if people were actually doing high intensity interval training correctly, they'd only be able to do it once a week at the most. I don't think anybody that talks about high intensity interval training has actually ever done it correctly. It should kill you. And so the fact that we're trying to push this group of women who were not sleeping, we're not recovering, we're not eating right, and you want us to go do high intensity interval training or walk, and those are our only two options, I can't think of a worse idea for a woman in perimenopause than to try to go out and kill herself doing high intensity interval training. So no, you don't need to do that for perimenopause, but you also don't need to do that in any other phase of your life. You need to work out in a way that is sustainable and enjoyable for you.
Well, what's really funny is this entire theory is not based on information in humans.
No, it's
It's
rat data.
It's rad data and it's mechanistic data. This is exactly one of the reasons that that question was asked earlier because people talk about this stuff all the time. But there's never been any outcome data to show that this is problematic. In fact, the outcome data shows that this is fine. And so it's really funny to push this type of thing because the typical comment that's made is women aren't small men, but apparently women are large mice.
Yeah, we're not large mice
Yeah,
either.
so why we're using mouse data in place of actual data in human females is beyond me, but everybody's buying into it, which is hilarious to me.
And
Yeah. Okay, one last one. Are taking BCAAs and EAAs beneficial? No, there's no reason for you to do this. Under 99% of situations where you would choose a BCAA or EAA product, you should just have a meal, or you should have a protein shake, or just not that. Maybe even carbs. I mean, like there are situations where people will recommend BCAAs and EAAs, and probably carbs are far more superior in every one of those applications. So, if you have any specific questions about that, certainly send a message or post up in Mighty Networks or on YouTube, and I can answer why. If you have any other questions, certainly send them our way. We can cover them next week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again. This has been another great Q&A. I hope you've learned a lot, and we will see you next week.
toodles.